to invite you into our daily briefing room with one of our leading tactical and strategic minds, years of experience at the highest level of the military, sharing insights into the state of the war in Ukraine. So, welcome to Drive, Lord Dannatt, former Chief of the General Staff, Head of the Army. Good afternoon to you.
John, good afternoon to you as well.
Hi, can I get your thoughts on an issue which is under discussion today, and that is the use of space-based technology in the war in Ukraine, and the way it is said to be being used by the Ukrainian military very effectively. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that it's absolutely right that space is being used. We need to push all the dimensions, all the environments out as far as we can in order to gain military advantage on or above the battlefield. So my understanding is that Air Chief Marshal Wigston, the Chief of the Royal Air Force, Chief of the Air Staff, has been speaking about that at his conference today. And, frankly, top marks to the Ukrainians and to their NATO supporters for gaining an advantage on the battlefield by use of space. So it's a necessary and sensible progression. The only thing that's got to be remembered, however, is that just because new technologies come in, and they may well be transformative, it doesn't mean that some of the old technologies and more traditional methods of waging war are no longer required. The disappointing thing for defence budgeteers and for chancellors of the Exchequer and so on is that as new things are developed, they have to be added to the inventory. It doesn't mean that other things can be taken out.
Yes.
So, well done for using space to advantage, but it doesn't mean to say you don't need boots on the ground.
Yeah, indeed. Well, that's an interesting and I guess important point. But again, we hear of the Russian military and how its capacity to operate has been, compared to attitudes in the not so distant past, overestimated. How the Russian effort in this regard has been rather clumsy. They have tech that doesn't work. It is not joined up in the way that it's joined up in the West, with personnel on the ground. In so many ways, Lord Dannatt, we've had a rather curious and distorted view of Russia's capabilities, haven't we?
Well, I think what's at the cause of this, frankly, is corruption. When you've got a regime, unlike the previous Soviet regime, which was built on iron discipline, the regime that Vladimir Putin heads now is one based on profit, on power, but actually so many people are on the make that they've taken shortcuts with their equipment procurement. I think they've taken shortcuts with their leadership training. They've taken shortcuts with their vehicle maintenance. And all that accumulates to being a problem. And I think that's probably at the heart of why the Russians are doing, frankly, so badly.
And when you look at this, what has been exposed of the weaknesses, the actual weaknesses in the Russian war machine, what does that mean for the balance of power in the future, strategic and military power in the future? We're not up against the kind of force that we'd imagined just a couple of years ago.
Well, we're not up against the force which we might have imagined a couple of years ago if we'd listened to their propaganda, but we're certainly not up against the force that was in existence up to the end of the Cold War, which was multiple times larger in the Soviet Union's armory, if you like. But what we thought had been a modernized, smaller force has actually turned out to be a smaller force that would appear to be rotten to the core. And the only reason why they've managed to make any success in the south, linking up Crimea through Mariupol to the Donbass region and in the Donbass region itself, is because they've used massive amounts of artillery. And when you use massive amounts of artillery, which has always been the Soviet-Russian way of doing war, then frankly, when you've destroyed everything in your path, then moving the hapless infantry in, they're always going to go in unopposed. And this is why the Ukrainians have actually been operationally very clever. They've hung on to places like Severodonetsk and Lysychansk for as long as they could, and then they've withdrawn. And the whole process of that has bought time for NATO weaponry to come into their hands, for countries